Thank you very much for that quick intro. And this is, again, another lightning round, so I'll try to be brief. But title of my talk, as you just heard, we're going to talk a little bit about communication strategy, which is not something that I think is often discussed at large at this conference, but hoping I have a couple interesting things to share with you all. Again, my name is Allie Bohan. I'm a senior director on the cyber and data privacy communications team at FTI Consulting. And what that means is I advise clients going through active cyber incidents as they're looking to engage their stakeholders and communicate with their customers, employees, business partners, media, regulators, you name it. All right, and there's me again. So I'm hoping that at the end of this quick session, for any of you that work in IR, I know we've got a lot of threat intel folks in here, but any of you that work in incident response like I do, or others that are working with clients that have experienced a cyber incident, you'll maybe think a little bit differently about your communication strategy and how that communication strategy can sometimes actually provoke the threat actors to re-extort or sort of up the ante. Before I do that, I'll discuss just a couple of the sort of new and really highly aggressive and in some cases nefarious extortion tactics that we're seeing as of late. And then I'll get into the communications piece. So a couple things here. The first bullet, I have CEO and leadership outreach. A threat actor reaching out to a CEO or other members of a leadership team is not new. They've been doing that for years. However, what we're noticing as of late is they're really sort of upping the ante. And I'll show you on the next slide a couple screenshots. But we've seen threat actors sending, in some cases, upwards of several thousand texts or voicemails or emails to a CEO a day to try to bring them to the negotiating table. And as you can imagine, as a CEO who has a day job and also probably a role on the incident response team, that's quite disruptive. Another one that is sort of one of the more bone-chilling tactics that I think any of us will see are these death threats. We've had a couple clients, I'd say actually probably more than a handful, who have received death threats from the threat actor. In some cases, they're referencing the United Healthcare CEO's death in 2024. In other cases, they're not referencing that at all, and they're just threatening harm in some way to the CEO or another leader and their family in some cases. And as I have here, sometimes even making direct references to an executive's home address, which is particularly sort of scary. So a couple screenshots here. If you look at the two that are sort of stacked on top of each other on the right, these are from a CEO who says here he's received almost 2,000 texts from the threat actor overnight. They're not backing off. In fact, it's heavier. In this particular case, it went on for days. That CEO and the leadership team and the organization writ large didn't want to negotiate at all. That was just sort of their philosophy, and that's fine. But this is sort of what we faced as a result, this absolute ambush in texts, voicemails even, and emails. On the left side, we have one of the more bone-chilling screenshots I could share with you all, a pretty ominous note from the threat actor to the CEO. In this case, the threat actor you'll see is Vice or Vice Society. And they say, we know where you live. We have the address of all your relatives. At the end of the period, we advise you to keep a better eye on your family. And in this particular case, the threat actor was able to get a hold of the CEO's address and sent them a bouquet of flowers and a condolence note to the CEO, which was, as you can imagine, really, really terrifying for the CEO and his family to receive. And so the death threats piece is really, really, I think, probably on the most nefarious end of the extortion tactics we see. But it also brings about considerations around swatting and a number of other things. So just something I wanted to call out here because it's particularly noteworthy, but unfortunately we're seeing it more and more. Okay, so let's get into the communications a little bit. So for years, we've helped our clients communicate with their stakeholders during an incident to sort of be as transparent and sort of clear as to what's going on, what they can do for their stakeholders, and sort of what's coming down the pike with respect to the investigation. And it has not been until recently that threat actors have started really taking note of the communications themselves. They've for years, and I know this was mentioned in another talk, kind of done their due diligence and read about a victim organization in the media, maybe read some of their regulatory disclosures, financial disclosures to the extent that they're public. They've been doing that for years to kind of, again, do their research and do their due diligence on a victim organization. But now we're seeing them start to read communications that a victim is putting out during a cyber incident to their employees, customers, maybe it's the media, to their business partners, et cetera. And a couple things that I just wanted to note here. So both of these we've seen from Shiny Hunters, which has been a particularly aggressive group over the past several months. We often have clients that are looking to kind of reassure their stakeholders that they're working with law enforcement to investigate an incident. They're not always doing this, but when they do, of course, it is something they often like to say, that they have sort of the resources and the backing of law enforcement, in some cases the federal government, helping them. And threat actors are not loving that particular line as of late, in particular Shiny Hunters. And in the case where that particular piece of messaging was used, the threat actor actually re-extorted the organization who had already paid, and kind of thought that they were done with the threat actor and they had settled and moved on. In another instance, we're seeing that when we have a client who mentions to their stakeholders that that the exfiltrated data has since been deleted or perhaps is no longer at risk of misuse. If you read between the lines, anyone in this room would probably take that to mean that the organization and the threat actor reached a settlement. Shiny Hunters in particular does not like that. I think they think it probably sort of impacts their own reputation for it to be potentially known publicly that they will, delete data that they've taken once they've reached a settlement with a victim organization. So motive aside, though, we're seeing this, and I'll share a couple screenshots on the next slide. Both of these are from Shiny Hunters in two different cases. They've sent these notes to our clients after they've said something to their stakeholders, whether it was a customer communication, something they've said to the media, and they're taking issue with it, and they've re-extorted a couple of our clients in response. And as I mentioned, in one of those cases, the client had actually decided to pay and they had already paid, and they kind of thought they were done negotiating and engaging with, in this case, it was Shiny Hunters. So it's just never really over is a takeaway here. And something I would say, and I know I have about a minute left, but this sort of role of the communicator in a cyber incident has been around for several years now, but it's only been recently that the communications is something we have to really be extra careful about when we think about what the threat actor might take any of this to mean, because they are using some communications to re-extort or up the ante in some other way. So that's it for me. I think I'm pretty much exactly at time. Thanks so much.